All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Cafecito with ILLCF Careers in Government. My name is Elizabeth Liz Villarreal, and I'm proud to be an ILLCF alumna, a past ILLCF scholarship recipient, and the chair of the Alumni Association Board Leadership and Development Committee. It's a pleasure to see all of you here today. But before we begin, a few quick reminders. Please keep your microphones muted unless speaking. Stay engaged and take notes if you'd like. We will have audience questions at the end. Please be respectful of speakers and each other. We hope today's conversation inspires you and helps you to see your own path in public service. With that, I'm happy to turn it over to our moderator, Maggie Olmos.
Thank you, Liz. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's Cafecito conversation on careers and government. My name is Margarita Maggie Olmos, and it is truly a pleasure to moderate this panel today. As someone who has also worked in government, I know these careers are about far more than policies and job titles. They are about people, purpose, and impact. Today, we will hear directly from professionals serving the state of Illinois. We're going to hear about their journeys, challenges, growth, and the meaning behind their public service. This conversation is designed to be reflective, honest, and inspiring, especially for students and young professionals exploring their own paths. Thank you all for being here today, and let us begin. So first, to begin, I would love for each of you to introduce yourselves, share your role, briefly walk us through your career journey, and tell us about the moment you realized public service was a part of your calling. So I see Diane first, so if you want to get us started.
Sure, thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank ILLCF for having us using this platform for us to express ourselves and to share our ideas and encourage folks to work for state government. My name is Diane Casas. I am my day job is with the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. I do a lot of different things with IDFPR, especially community outreach. I'm the subject matter when it comes to that. So I go out to the job fairs, I go to legislative events and represent the agency, talk about the different licenses that we have with Illinois. And about 4 years ago, I joined IASE. And I started as a board member. I was encouraged by Mr. Charneco, who's on our panel. And he has become a mentor to a lot of us, including myself. And he said, I think you need to join the board. I said, oh, I've never been on a board. I don't know what that is. And he's like, yeah, I think you need to do it. I said, okay. So our head secretary, our agency had encouraged me as well. He's like, you really need to be on that board. I said, okay. So I started out board member. Then they said, you know what, we need a secretary. I said, okay, what's that entail? Well, just taking notes. I'm like, yeah, I can do note taking. Sure, I could do that. And then our board president was like, yeah, I'm gonna leave now. I'm gonna leave it all up to you. So I moved into vice president. Again, I don't know what vice president does. I'm like, yeah, I'll be vice president. Sure, I'll add that to my list. Okay. And then the president says, you know what, Diane? Yeah, I'm gonna leave as well. I'm done. I'm like, all right, so what's that mean? She's like, well, then you're gonna take it on. So they voted me in. I said, okay. And it's changed my whole perspective on just being a volunteer. And I can talk more about that later, but I'm the board president now, and I proudly serve IASE. I'm a humble member. I'm a humble servant, public servant to our constituents of Illinois and to our growing membership with IASE. So with that said, I'll leave it to Carlos or Chris to go. So thank you, Maggie.
Okay, well, age before beauty. My name is Carlos Charneco. I'm a retired state worker, worked for the state of Illinois for close to 38 years. I currently serve as the chairman of the Hispanic Employment Plan Advisory Council, where you serve as an appointee of the governor's office. I went into state government, um, I want to say by accident. A classmate at Northwestern University where I attended told me that they were looking for a bilingual worker at the what we all call the unemployment benefits in Evanston. So I wind up going through that process, getting hired. I think what motivated me to stay in government was really the lack of bilingual staff, and we're talking about the early 80s, where I was the only bilingual worker helping people with their unemployment claims. And then the other things that happened throughout my state career that kept me engaged in public service. So I think that's my major motivation for the most part. So and even if I am retired, I still stay active and watchful about services to the Latino community where we think we have some shortfalls with state government. So, which is why I serve on the advisory council. And go ahead, Chris.
Hello, all. My name is Chris Naranjo. I am the statewide manager for Latinx diversity and inclusion, which means that I work really closely with both Diane and Carlos in different capacities. I am the manager for the Employment Plan Advisory Council, so Carlos and I are constantly in conversation. And then Diane and I are always chatting about what is going on with the ASE. It is one of the great pillars here at the state of Illinois for Latino employees. So if you're not a member and you work for the state of Illinois, please do consider joining. Um, there's your plug, Diane, if nothing else. I want to make sure folks know where to go to and make sure that they join EASE. Prior to working at the state, I've only been here a year. I was at Hope Chicago, and before that, I was at City Colleges of Chicago. So tangentially in government work before I came to do this work, I was working in scholarships and administering some of their scholarship funds for 3 years. So coming into state government, it was really about what was that next step in my career and making sure that we are providing services to folks that look and sound like me, folks that look and sound like my parents, and making sure that we are addressing the needs that we reflect the constituency that we are here to serve. And right now, one of the biggest issues that the state of Illinois is facing is that it is missing, there's about a 12% gap. So in our state workforce, it is 7.7% Hispanic Latino identifying, and the state population itself is 19%. So that's about a 12% gap that we are not covering and addressing when we are discussing Latinos. So we are a pretty big minority. I hate to use that word only because I feel like we are all here in this together. But the fact that we are not being addressed or being represented appropriately is something that is shocking and something that I really want to make sure we addressed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, Chris. I think that's one of the things that we're all striving to make sure that there's representation, equal representation, across all agencies and different levels of staffing as well. And so with that, you mentioned something that is very crucial in that we need more representation. How or what inspired, and this question is posed for any of you, or how were you inspired to pursue a career in public service? What has kept you in government work? And what makes this work personally meaningful and fulfilling for you?
I'll take this
Well,
one.
go ahead. You want to go, Diane? Are you
Yeah, I'll
good?
take this one.
All
Yeah.
right.
Um, so I'm gonna be really honest. I'm gonna be very transparent. I wanted to go in state government because of all the holidays that we get and all the time, the paid time off. That's like bonus for me. Several years ago, I come from private practice as well, private sector. And in private sector, you have your limited days off. There is not much of a work-life balance. My third position that I have in life is caretaker. I have an 89-year-old elderly parent that I advocate for. So I take her to a lot of her doctor's appointments, talk to her doctors, everything that she needs. In fact, we just got new appliances delivered, and they're like, "Okay, so who's taking?" I'm like, "I'm the one who's doing everything for her." So with that work-life balance that the state gives me, it gives me more motivation to advocate for our constituents, to advocate for our Latino families, because I'm first generation. I come from my parents wanting to assimilate into the US. So I can relate to a lot of the families, the students, and the adults that are looking for employment. And that's why IASA was very important to me, and it's changed my life because I can incorporate my work with IDFPR, my work with Ayase, with my work with my mom to help, and that kind of like I have that circle of like this is where my purpose is. My purpose is advocating, helping, outreach. And the state gives me that ability when you work with people like Chris Naranjo, who is a CMS. Like right now, I'm like, I really want to write those notes about the percentage because we're collaborating. I'm getting text messages. So I'm always learning from people like Carlos and other folks, all my peers at CMS, with Maggie at ILLCF, with the entire staff. So that motivates me to keep going, to keep my tenure with the state because if I leave my agency, I'm leaving for another agency and not going back to private sector. I'm going to stay within the state because it's a very rewarding position. So that's what I have. That's my take on state government.
I think for me, when I first started, I was overwhelmed by the number of clients who came to file for unemployment insurance benefits to the point that I would skip my breaks because they were waiting longer than the English speakers, right? And I felt bad about it. So, and I think as one moved on and as I moved from that job to more supervisory to management to middle management to upper management, you start learning more about how you can make changes in government to better serve the community. Changes like where do we need to increase bilingual staffing? And it wasn't just enough to the need for the bilingual. You could sit there and say that we need more bilingual staff, but you got to go find those people who want to work in the agency because they'll post a job and oh, we didn't get anybody to apply. So it's also about recruiting. The advantage of the Department of Employment Security, my first agency, where I also managed a local office and eventually became the affirmative action officer, was whenever we posted and I influenced management to create more bilingual positions. Um, we also used the staff, the Latino staff in the office to recruit those people. They were a captured audience to go ahead and test. And as you move on, and I also worked at CMS for 4 years doing the minority employment plans, and another 2 years at Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity dealing with compliance of equal opportunity. So what I see is the ability to make influence to change where uh, Latinos have better access to services and are treated better. And that's important. I mean, I was able to influence a particular process that it was occurring where people, they would have a green card and then the green card would have an expiration date on it. And they're supposed to take, people were the assumption that they would get a new green card or apply for another one. So the under local offices were denying people on that. But the reality was, after I researched it and discussed it with the legal team, is that just because the card was expired doesn't mean they stop having authorization to work. So, and I became aware of that only because of a community group that reached out to me about it. Okay. So we changed that. We retrained the staff. So eventually what happened was that people were no longer being denied just because the green card authorization had expired. So, and that's a big impact right there because the denial rate was really high for Latinos as a result of that. As you move forward and you start looking at who are the decision makers, because if I wasn't in that position, I would have not been able to. That process might have still be continuing to this day. Okay, so the importance of moving into management, moving into a position where you can influence decisions, to have a voice, right? And when I talk about voice, I believe that Latino state workers in general are the voice of what goes on in state government as it affects the Latino community, because they're also the voice for the constituent, the Latino constituent who comes and interacts with public service, right? And so you see the barriers that occur, how people are being treated. So when you're then in upper management, you can make some kind of influence, bring attention to the problems, and collaborate so that we can make things better and more accessible and treat people better. So I think those are important aspects of what we do in state government when we come to work as Latino workers. Um, and the fact that we have such a small representation of less than 8%, um, which means we work harder. And we know that from Latinos that their caseloads tend to be higher. They take more people. And so they are, impacted by that as well. So, and it's not all just about having Latinos in the northern part of Illinois. It's about looking at state facilities throughout the state of Illinois where we have Latino, significant pockets of Latinos, whether it's in the East St. Louis area, Springfield, Southern Illinois. So those things you kind of look. Then you get as I grew into my job, I saw a much broader issue going on in state government. And my one thing that really influenced me had a really impact is when I was told by my agency at the Department of Employment Security to go show up at a meeting in Springfield, which was my first trip to Springfield. This meeting was called by then Senator Miguel del Valle, who called in a bunch of state agencies uh, and asking questions of how people are being treated, how Latinos are being treated. And I remember the conversation and the questions he would ask, and it just stayed with me to say, I got to be asking those same questions uh, that is occurring. How do you service this client? What happens with the interaction with state police and a limited English speaker? What happens when people try to file for any type of state benefit? What is the interaction like? So those things are important to me. And I think you grow with it, and you hope that I've saved people's jobs at times as well when they were trying to something. It's not often you have layoffs in state government, but when it does happen, they go through a bumping process. And I remember a girl was told she was being laid off and she was a bilingual worker, except the person bumping into the position didn't speak Spanish. I had to go back to HR and Labor Relations and correct that and push the envelope on that. Otherwise, she'd been out of work. So these things, there's all kinds of things that come up because Latino workers may not complain to their supervisor about issues, but they will tell the association, for example, of what's going on.
Thank you for that, Carlos. So I want to pivot, Chris, since you are the newest member of the Illinois workforce. Many young professionals do not grow up seeing people who look like them in government leadership. Did you always envision yourself in this space, or did someone help you believe you belong there?
The short answer is no. My background is actually my undergrad degree is in public health. And I always imagined myself going to medical school and doing something entirely different. While I was preparing for the MCAT, realized I needed to pivot, not because I couldn't do the work, it was because it was just there were other ways to impact my community. My idea was to be a really prominent doctor that was bilingual in Chicago and being able to do that work. I had a long conversation with my dad about it and asked him for his advice, and he was like, "Well, just because you can't be a doctor doesn't mean you can't run the hospital that you might want to work at one day." So he told me to go back to school, and so I went back to school and got my MBA in finance, and so that's how I ended up working in scholarships and banking and doing a lot of stuff that was unaffiliated, but it gave me a really interesting Venn diagram where I'm Hispanic Latino. I speak Spanish. I can do the finance work, so Excel, all of that. And then also on top of that, I've got a background focus on um, public health. My dad's a social worker, so this has always been one of those things. Social services has been one of the primary things that he's always made sure that I was aware of. And I guess one of the biggest things that I remember as a kid was thinking, going to meetings with him, organizing meetings, anything it was, that no matter what, uh, availability does not mean accessibility. And that is something that is sometimes missed out when describing the Latino community, at times because maybe we're a bit quiet as far as our needs are, but also because we just don't realize what is available to us. And that is by virtue of just that long, circuitous route that I got to get here, it has really shown me how true that statement is, right? Availability does not mean accessibility. Like, we need to really address the fact that we have so many folks that don't speak English, don't have access to these things because they aren't aware of them. They're not aware of the hours, the hours that they're putting in at work. Like when I go home and I take the bus home or the train home, how many people are getting off of work right at 6 o'clock and aren't able to access things that the state is providing to them? And this is something that just makes me scratch my head and baffles me sometimes because I'm like, if you're not able to communicate or if you're not able to even arrive to the offices that we're discussing, then what's the point, right? Like, we're not able to take advantage of the same things that everybody else is. And then also growing up at home, sometimes being the translator, right? Not necessarily with my parents, because both my parents luckily spoke English, but for my grandparents, for my aunts and uncles visiting, or for anybody else that was around in those moments in time where I was the only person at 5 or 6 years old in the house that was able to converse in both languages and really get across the message. But that's a scary thought as well when you start thinking about legal services, public aid, anything else that you might be thinking of, that it's really hard to address. While I didn't have anybody in government that I really looked up to in that sense. My dad was highly politically active when I was growing up, so I remember Miguel del Valle's campaign. I remember Chuy's campaign. I remember lots of campaigns coming by my house and whatnot, and still really much a big part of my life, whether it's canvassing or it's getting folks to sign up for different events and making sure that we're being heard and listened to. If you're not invited to the table, bring a chair and just show up. Sometimes you need to be there, right? So knowing where things are at, that's part of the accessibility and making sure that it's super clear to everyone. We're not going to be turned away. Whether it's through the front door, we'll come in through the side or the back door. We're not here to take part. We're here to take over.
Yeah, definitely, Chris. And speaking of community and making things accessible, Diane, in what ways has your role allowed you to make a meaningful impact in your community? And what has been one of the most rewarding moments in your public service career?
Wow, that's a mouthful, Maggie. That's a
It is, it
mouthful.
is.
Because I'm thinking there's been a lot of moments. I'll share when I first was introduced to the role of IDFPR. And I love sharing this story because it's pretty comical. It was March 2nd of 2020 is when I started at the state, and like 2 weeks later, COVID hit. Right? COVID hit, and I'm like, okay, so what now? And I was hired to do outreach to go to your Springfield. Like Carlos, I didn't, I hadn't gone to Springfield. What the time of my career that started. So I started using using my skill set and said, okay, well, I'm not going to be that non-essential worker because I come from my both my parents are Mexicanos, right? And I'm taught to go to work and be visible and always volunteer for stuff and be grateful to have a job. So that's what my take was when I started with IDFPR. But as the time went by, my mind started opening more of that community service. When I did get the opportunity to go out into the community, when I spoke to people face to face about their concerns of just even having a license to be a barber, to be a cosmetologist, massage therapy. I learned as I went out I learned different ways myself, like kind of self-teaching myself because I didn't really know what the position was because again, this is like COVID. And as they started lifting the doors, like lifting, like, okay, COVID wasn't as bad. You can still go out, but you had your mask and stuff. I started talking to people and engaging with them about people, doctors and nurses and even real estate brokers, roofers. A lot of our community, they don't know and understand that just because you go to the doctor, you're going to follow whatever the doctor says because they're in a white coat and they're important and they could, mishandle you. They can do a lot of stuff that's not inappropriate. So I started changing it up around and educating them in my language, in Espanol. I was able to communicate with them. So they see me and they're like, oh, you habla Espanol, she can help me. So that's where it's become a little bigger than myself because I have physicians call me and nurses and pharmacy techs and cosmetologists. They call me, hey, can you help me with this? And I have your people who are in the community calling me as well. ¿Me puedes ayudar? No sabía que necesitaba licencia. So I love to use my Spanglish a lot, but yeah, it's come in handy for me and it's very rewarding. And I want to go back to where Carlos said about that we're not just in the Chicago area because I live in Chicago, right? I'm in Little Village. I'm in the heart of Little Village, and I don't know about East Missouri, like East St. Louis. I don't know that. I like calling it Missouri. So I don't know that. So when I start working with the boards and committees with IDFPR, The governor's office is very adamant and they're like, we need geographic representation, Diane. Geographic meaning we need to go south. And I'm like, but no, I live in a little village. Like I live here on the north side, of the state. So that's where I've learned that there are communities like Kankakee, there's south of Springfield, there's immigration advocacies outside of Springfield. So that's where we're headed. And that's so rewarding to me to be able to interact with those folks. I mean, I'll travel and I'll meet people and you'll see the community. So that's very rewarding for me. And that's why I'm very grateful to be able to work as a public servant with the state of Illinois. In a nutshell, right, Maggie? In a nutshell.
Yes, no, I mean that's perfectly stated. And with the communities across Illinois and Carlos, with your vast experience of decades being a government employee and navigating the systems, many people see the government as systems and bureaucracy, but behind every agency are people just trying to improve their lives. How would you stay connected to the human side of work?
For me, the interaction with human beings, as you say, it's a combination of both the state workers themselves and the public who seek services from the state. On the one hand, you talk to Latino state workers who tell you what's going on in their agency or their location. And I've interacted, I mean, we have over 30 some state agencies. So you interact with folks and what they see and what they hear. I have conversations with the people who are bilingual at Department of Revenue, which we have a large taxpayer base. And they're interacting with small Latino business owners to help them with their state taxes and also with individual taxpayers. So you hear that what they're telling you. You hear, for example, people telling you, state worker who works with people with disability, what's going on, that we don't have enough bilingual staff. Uh, you hear people reaching out about, hey, I had a problem with one agency. I mean, just about every agency is going to interact with a Latino individual. You don't think about agriculture interacting with Latinos, for example. Nobody thinks about that. But the reality is, the people who work to handle pesticides are Latinos, and they have to get licensed by Department of Agriculture, right? So that's an example where you don't even think about what the interaction is there, right? And as you listen and you hear stories like, oh, by the way, Carlos, man, they're using the security guard as interpreters, or they're using prisoners to interpret for other prisoners. That doesn't seem right. Okay. So you have that interaction. You have an interaction with someone who says, hey, I got La Prima here having problems with an agency. And I said, let me talk to them. And they find out that they wanted a bilingual person, but they didn't get a bilingual person. They claim that you can use a telephone interpreter if no bilingual staff, but they didn't use it, right? They're not using it. They're telling people go back and bring somebody that can help you. These things you hear from the various Latino state workers in various state agencies. So you hear that combination of what the state workers saying and what people are saying seeking those services. Uh, a lot of my interaction also has to do with the fact that people who are interested in working for the state reach out to me and tell me and give me feedback of the process, right? And there's also the interaction with the state worker when they would like to know more about how they handle certain conflicts in their workplace, right? So we get a lot of that interaction, especially coming from members of the association. And so we work, and then, we take all this information that we hear and we find out, and then we reach out to whether it's the governor's office, agency directors, their affirmative action officers. We interact with those folks to talk about concerns. If we have a high turnover at a location of Latinos, then we need to find out why that's happening, and it needs to be addressed. So that's the interaction that typically we're going to have. You have also community organizations who provide feedback. Hey, you know what? That office over there, I don't send my people over there because that's not working for them. We're sending them across town. Okay. I mean, even it's not just the Latinos, for example. I remember we had an unemployment office on the southwest side of Chicago, and all the Polish people wouldn't go there. They'd go to the one on the north side because they had bilingual staff there. and not the one that's closer to their home because they weren't treated right. There was a language barrier. So, what we do actually as an association is actually opening up doors, not just for Latinos, but we're also impacting what's going on with other communities with other languages. So that's my interaction for the most part. I think it's just staying motivated when you hear sad stories and you hear stories about what goes on, people being denied, that they're not getting the benefits. People call me up, hey, I'm having problems with a license as a beautician, and the beauty of having Latino state workers stay interconnected from the various state agencies is that you're able to refer that person and say, you know what, I know somebody at this agency. I'll have Maria call you. I'll have Jose call you, Javier. And that interaction helps out because there's not enough of us to begin with. So we almost have to work among each other in the 30 some state agencies.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you bring up a good point in that there's agencies that have different roles that we just don't really think about, like in agriculture. And so, Chris, as a statewide manager for Latinx DNI, um, government careers are often misunderstood as rigid or very limited. What are some misconceptions people have about public service, and what opportunities or career paths within the state government do people often overlook?
I think the biggest one that I get a lot of the time is that people think that you're not paid well. Uh, I can say that's untrue, pretty much up front. I think I'm paid well to do my work, and then on top of that, I have an incredible work-life balance. I'm able to go home at the end of the day and put away work for a little bit and really make sure that it is clear what I am working on. The other part I think is the amount of influence you have. I mean, the people that write the policies know the best way to navigate them, right? So being close to those policies makes it so that you're able to work within them. I work a lot in outreach and making sure that folks are aware of positions that are available at the state of Illinois, whether that's entry level or higher up. What are merit compositions versus what are bargaining unit or union positions, and making sure that folks are aware of that. But I think what happens a lot of the time when I'm looking and speaking to job seekers is they're not even thinking of the state. They don't realize that the state has 56, almost 57,000 employees all across 102 counties, and you don't have to live in the state of Illinois to work for the state of Illinois. That is not a requirement. You really have so many opportunities to work pretty much anywhere as long as your position allows it. And also, it is available to you and anyone else. The hardest part, I think, is landing that role. I think the state does ask for very specific information to try and make it a more equitable process. And in certain ways, that goes against what we have been taught and what we have been learned, just a one-page resume. No, the state wants to know more about you. It's really about us telling our stories and making it really clear what are your skills. And I think that as Latinos, we have a ton of skills that we are sometimes we have forgotten to how to market ourselves. Um, that it seem almost as if we're bragging or arrogant. And no, we're just being honest about the skills that we are bringing to the table. And on top of that, you also see it, I think, in leadership a little bit too. The state really falls behind as far as having Latino representation in leadership. And it is something that we need to address. And I think part of that is marketing ourselves and making sure that we are not undercutting ourselves. And sometimes it's a bit of, that self-depreciation. But there are moments that I have those conversations with coworkers, with other people, and I'm like, hey, I've had a coworker making fun of themselves, and I'm like, I'm not going to let you talk about my friend that way. You have to remind people to lift themselves up as well, and lift them up in the process. I think one of my favorite things to do is get to see everybody, whether it's at the IASE conference or at Latino Unity Day, and just making sure people are aware you're doing a great job, or I've noticed this is going on, and lifting each other up. Because it's one thing, it's friendly to sometimes make fun of each other, and it's very much a sibling thing to do and a Latino thing to do. But we also need to remember to lift each other up and be like, you should absolutely apply for this. One of my favorite things has been joining the state. It's learning from people and asking them their opinion. They're like, you're a shoo-in for that. Go do that now, please. Like, please go apply to that because we need somebody like you to represent us. And finding out that there are plenty of people outside of the state that are interested in doing that as well. So when I'm at events, that's the biggest thing that I can say. Doing outreach and recruitment, it's making sure that folks are aware you are more than enough to come enjoy the state. I have worked with a ton of people that have been incredibly impressive, looked at their resumes and been like, please come join us. We need someone like you to come and join us. So making sure that they're aware first and foremost, and then from there following up and staying on top of them so that they keep applying to the state of Illinois because we are looking forward to having a ton more Latinos and Hispanics join the state.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think a lot of us don't realize the soft and hard skills that we have and how to, you know, be able to portray that on an application or a resume because we've been taught to, less is more. But in this case of working for the state, more is better because you want to make sure that you're able to market yourself and all the abilities that you have. And so, Diane, I want to pose this question to you. Many professionals experience intimidation or imposter syndrome in government spaces. What has helped you build confidence, navigate those environments, and overcome moments when you questioned whether you belonged?
Maggie, did you like get in my head or something? Did you get in my brain and like said imposter syndrome? Because I was waiting for you to be done. So I need to add to this imposter syndrome. So thank you. Imposter syndrome exists. It is the vein of our existence. Um, we as a culture, and I love what Chris said. Thank you, Chris, because I'm just like my wheels are turning. When when we are taught like don't brag about yourself, no seas de presumida, no seas de sangrón, like, or you're not supposed to say how much money you make. And that's when we come in to our workspace or when we want to apply for a position. The advantage that I have is that I get to do a lot of public facing outreach, and I see individuals who are on the other side of the table. When I was there at some point in my life where I was in a crossroads, I didn't know what I wanted to do. You're out of work and you have that like I don't belong in this space or how really I'm here, I work for the state. So what the advantage that I have is I have that ability to talk to people and to tell them you do have the ability, you do have the skill set, the soft, the hard. I was at a job fair a couple weeks ago and people came to me and said, I interviewed for this position. I didn't quite understand the question and I said no to it. And I didn't get the job. I said, well, let's really think hard about our soft skills because we're so honed in on our career, on our education, but we don't think about the soft skills that we have. We're caretakers, we're finance managers, we're appointment takers, we're transportation. We have so much. We have a robust resume, and we need to add that all in there. What I do is when we talked, like Carlos and I, when we talked to our executive leadership, like we did 2 weeks ago at Latino Unity Day, we have that low-hanging fruit, those individuals that have that talent who may shy away from applying for a position because they don't feel like maybe they're qualified enough. But we need to give them that encouragement and to show them, like someone like me. I'll share with you, I wasn't your traditional after high school, let's go to college. I was like, well, I'm gonna go to work. I'm gonna go find a job. I wanted to work at an office. I didn't have a skill set for an office, but I didn't want to work at a, don't take this in the wrong way, anybody, if you worked at a Burger King or, fast food. I didn't want to do flipping burgers after high school. I wanted to work in an office space. I didn't know how to type because I'm going to show a little bit my age. I learned how to type on a typewriter. And I didn't want to I don't know how to type, but I told my new boss in an accounting firm, like, I know how to type, I know how to do all this because I have a good skill set. Like I know how to give gift of the jab. So you learn that way. And that's how you start working your way up and you start chipping away of that imposter syndrome that you have that you've been maybe taught as a young child. Because as Latinos, culturally, our parents come from a different country and they want to stay at the same job and they don't want to ruffle any feathers and don't rattle the cage, no digas nada, quédate calladita, because you're going to get fired. No, you want to build those people up. So that's what I could say about imposter syndrome and working with leadership and working for the state.
Thank you, Diane. That was really insightful. And I think one of the other things that you mentioned is that through your role, you've translated and become that bilingual point of contact for your agency. And so, Carlos, um, there are still barriers that exist for Latin professionals pursuing careers in government and public. Um, what kind of benefits exist for bilingual people and what I guess some opportunities for them also in the future as bilingual state employees.
Bilingual staffing is really critical in part in administrating the programs that are developed by the state. I mean, it doesn't do you any good to have a program that helps people with energy assistance that pays their electric bill if we don't have Latinos promoting it within the Latino community. It doesn't do any good that the Illinois Housing Development Authority has a program to help people with their rent if you don't have Latinos communicating that within the Latino community. When I worked as an affirmative action officer, what I became more involved with in equal opportunity compliance is data and looking at participation rates of the program. So to me, what is important to look at is if we're going to run a program, if we're saying that we provide services to people with disabilities at the Division of Rehabilitation Services, I would be looking at, for example, what is the participation rate of Latinos with disabilities in the program? And if it's very low, then it has to come into question. And this is where you need bilingual staff. And we had to fight, for example, to include more bilingual staff in a particular unit at an agency that dealt with adjudicating people's disability claims at the state level. And they kept saying that, hey, they couldn't do it, blah, blah, blah. But we fought. And, now we expect that that's going to happen, more bilingual staff. So it doesn't do any good having programs if it's not administered with Latino representation. They're just not gonna, I mean, if you're talking about workforce and we have this WIOA program, helps people find employment or helps people get training. But if the youth is not participating, Latinos are not participating in, then really that program is about other people, not Latinos, right? So it's important to have the bilingual staff to communicate. The reality is that when you create bilingual positions, um, that means only the people who speak Spanish or any other language, for example, that they're required, Polish, Ukrainian, whatever, it becomes a smaller field of applicants and you have better chances of getting in. I mean, look, when you look at the total number of Latinos working for the state, 40% of them get bilingual pay. You take away bilingual pay, you're not going to have that 7.7% representation in state government for in terms of workforce representation, just not going to. So this is important. Establishing bilingual positions are important. It opens the door for Latinos. Second of all, by opening doors for Latinos to work in public service, they're opening the doors for the public, the Latino community to access those programs. So Latinos explaining to these folks how they're eligible for those programs. So this is a very important impact that just whatever program they come up with in the General Assembly, if it's not administered by Latinos, that means Latinos are going to be left out.
Thank you, Carlos. And Chris, I want to highlight a lot of the people on the call who are currently not state employees, but are looking to possibly consider state employment. And I guess, what skills, experiences, mentorship, or professional development opportunities helped you grow and succeed throughout your career in government?
That is a very big question, Maggie. I'll start by I think customer service. I think we are used to a level of customer service and warmth that cannot be found in a lot of places, but the state desperately needs. It is sometimes lacking in that sense, where it's not a very warm place. If you've ever done an interview with the state, it's very cold, and that's on purpose, and I understand why for equity purposes. It is, I don't know, I feel like Latinos and Hispanics really liven up a place when we show up. Not to make it, I think the food helps, the culture helps, the decoration, the color, all of it. It just helps to make it feel a little bit more inviting because we're so social. It's part of our culture, right? And it's really, really important. So thinking of those soft skills is the biggest thing that I can think of right off the top of my head, making sure that we're addressing sometimes the answer to a question is no, but the way that you follow up and provide that service afterwards is what makes a big difference to people because then they know how to navigate the system and thinking of those skills. But really, I would highlight to anybody, please look at the positions that are available at the state. I am more than happy to come and teach you all how to do it so that you are aware of the number of vacancies that we have at the state. I was doing a training yesterday and we have about 362 positions online right now. Well, this was as of yesterday. There's continuous turnover on those roles, but the number of vacancies is actually much higher because if you click on any job posting, you can actually see the number of vacancies. And for bilingual positions, there's always a ton of vacancies. So I highly, highly recommend to anybody that's looking, please look for those Spanish language bilingual options if you speak Spanish. And if you don't speak Spanish, still take a peek because I want you to just understand if you know anybody that speaks Spanish or anything there, and there's a number of vacancies, we're usually filling at least 4 to 5 positions constantly that need to speak Spanish, especially depending on the agency. Separately, so language skill, that's an incredible impact. Our soft skills, that's the second. And then the third, it's true life experience, whether it's volunteering at be it at church, um, with our local organizations, our unions, anything of that sort. All of that counts as experience to us. Anything you've done in college and university for your internships, anything you've done for your coursework, that is all experience. That counts at the state of Illinois. And we want to make sure that that's being quantified and put on your resume because it makes a difference as we ask you those yes or no questions. These are the minimum qualifications that people don't realize that they meet. And a lot of these roles, they only require a high school diploma and maybe a year of experience doing those sorts of things. And those are the entry level roles. So if you're looking, that's a great way to start. Separately, if it's a higher position, maybe management or director level position, it'll tell you exactly what we're looking for. And if you've got that experience, sometimes it's really just about talking to someone else about your experience because we forget about all the things that we've done, whether it's traveling across the world or, doing A, Y, A, B, and C for our families, right? These are the things that we do as far as managing households and managing families, managing care for other individuals, managing relationships. That's possibly the biggest thing at the state of Illinois. It's managing relationships and making sure that, maybe you'll upset somebody, but being able to come back around and apologize and moving on from that, that's huge. That's something that we're always looking for. And then also growing with it and making sure that you are quantifying what you're doing. Education isn't the end all be all. Experience is really what matters here. And I think a lot of people on this call have quite a bit of experience and should really take that to heart and make sure that they're addressing everything that they've truly done. Um, it doesn't need to be limited to 1 or 2 pages as well. Thank you, Carlos, for mentioning that in the chat. Most resumes at the state that I look at are at least 4 pages long, realistically. That's how you're going to make it because you need to be able to prove and for what amount of time that you did this work. So be really detailed, be very thorough, and be aware of who you're chatting with. And then also, if you need to, please reach out. I'm happy to put you in touch with CMS and career counseling here at the state of Illinois so that you can land those jobs and start getting those interviews.
Thank you, Chris. And you mentioned, the network of working for the state is vast. I mean, you said, I think, if I remember correctly, about 52,000 employees, which is super huge. For a lot of people that are just coming out of college, or maybe they're working for like a small, um, you know, uh, firm of whatever that looks like, it could be very lonely. And so, Diane, the question for you is, who helped shape your leadership journey and professional growth, and how do you try to mentor or open doors for others entering public service?
That's a good question. Everyone in my circle, everybody that I meet is a leader in they're a leader in my life. I learn from every single individual that I come across. I um I have a mentor at my agency, our head secretary, the executive leader, who said to me once, he's like, "You're on a board, Diane. Yes, you are." He said, "But you have your own board. You have your own table. You have your advisors. And I'm like, you know what? That's really good. That's I had an analogy. I hadn't really thought of that. So every single person that I work with, every person that I'm on the board with, family members, friends, they are my advisors. I learn from them. From every single person that I've had a conversation with, I'm like, oh, I learned something new, a new word. And that encourages me to keep going so that I can share my wealth of knowledge with somebody else. Don't hold on to what you have. It's we're all climbing up the same ladder and we're not trying to reach over and like, no, I'm first. I'm first. No, we're not. We're not doing that. We are here together to work together, to learn from each other, to if we're having a bad day, being there for that one individual, keeping an open ear, not interrupting and listening to them. Sometimes people just need for you just to listen. And I'll do that. I'll say, you know what? I just need to vent. I just need to just don't I don't need your opinion right now. I appreciate it, but I really just want you to listen. And when you have good leaders, when you have a good leader in your agency, in your workplace, that helps you in your journey to for professional growth, that helps tremendously because I am here and I am part of the asset because of that leadership that I have. People who believe in me, people who say, go and do your thing. That's good because they know that I'm going to bring it back to the office. They know that I'm going to bring it back to my professional position, to my position at work. That helps me, the environment, creating a more of a healthier environment, an open door policy where I can go to leadership and say, I'm in a pickle. I need some guidance. Can you please just tell me what to do or just guide me. That's what helps me. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis and I give myself grace. And maybe when I put my foot in my mouth, when I wasn't supposed to say something because, my thoughts kind of come out first, my thoughts here before they go here. So it's just a matter of just picking up and just staying quiet sometimes and people gravitate to that. People who you work around or people in your family, they'll see that change, that shift, and they'll gravitate and they'll say, I want what they have. I want what they're doing because they're level-headed. So that's what I have to say for that.
Thank you, Diane. And Carlos, given that you've been able to see a lot of change transition from bilingual pay to the enactment of the Hispanic Employment Plan Advisory Council, what changes would you like to still see in state government regarding equity, inclusion, recruitment, retention, and workplace culture to ensure employees feel valued and empowered?
I think one thing is, first of all, uh, when it's really got to continue to push the interview panelists, right? The people who do the interviews, that it continues to be diverse. And we cannot tolerate having a predominantly one group of panelists that with no Hispanics on there doing interviews. And those interviews are very structured to begin with, usually 8 to 10 questions, and they're asked everybody the same question. But to me, there's still a degree of subjectivity as to how well you answered the questions by each of the panelists. So I have a particular concern about that part in state government. That needs to be better, and state agencies need to be more accounted for in that diversity. Sometimes I even think there are some situations in which people are selected to be on a panel who aren't really don't have knowledge about the job that you are, interviewing people for. And I have an issue. I mean, you can't have like if you're interviewing somebody for a senior position, you can't have people in lower management doing the interviews. Okay, that doesn't make any sense because they probably don't have the same general knowledge necessarily. I think um, when we look at changes, obviously, is they need to pay more attention to assessing where bilingual staffing should be. All right. And the way they determine that, because what I see is state agencies think they can get away with one bilingual person, and sometimes they think they can hire a bilingual office associate or office assistant. They become the interpreter for the other frontline staff who has a higher title, right? Whether it's an employment security program representative or a caseworker. And I think that needs to stop. I think people, and I don't have a problem with people being hired bilingual positions in an office clerical position. That's a foot in the door. But the agencies need also to make sure they create positions bilingual for the actual frontline people doing the work. All right. The people adjudicating, people determining benefit eligibility, right? They need to be bilingual and they need more of those. They can't just go by one or two and think that's enough. So those are two aspects I think is the interview process. I think the other part that we need to do better with is in the recruitment area of Latinos. Oftentimes, most HR departments and state agencies, they are not necessarily recruiters. They're transactional people. They post the job, they upload the posting, they collect the names of the people, they prepare them for onboarding, right? Some agencies have a recruitment team, right? So I can see why Lupe Leon on this chat, who's a recruiter for DHS, for example, and you have Zaya Gutierrez, which I'd like to give a shout out to here on this because she's one of 7, 8 Latino workers at CMS doing career counseling. So you got to have these people in place to do better uh, in getting people into state government. That for sure. I think having Latinos doing recruitment means that we can anticipate that they're going to know their community, they know where to recruit, they know which are the Hispanic serving institutions in terms of community colleges and universities. Those things are important, I think, and getting out there and really engaging people. Because I just think the agencies don't necessarily engage. And I don't think that in state government, when it comes to the upper management positions, sometimes what we call, deputy directors, chief of staff, and there ain't enough Latino general counsels out in state government. Okay, that's another fact. And that needs because they're involved very much involved with policy. So those things need to change. The lack of key position, chief fiscal officer, it's very difficult to find a Latino in that role in any of the state agencies. Um, there is going to have to be more aggressive recruitment by agencies, more targeted that needs to be done, more collaboration among state agencies to do recruitment, building up contacts within the Latino community, knowing who are the institutions serving Latinos in the workforce area, for example, who are the Latinos engaged at the university level with the Latino students to recruit, whether it be professors. I mean, sometimes the agencies think it's enough to just be in contact with the career service of an agency. You got to go beyond that. You need to find out where the Latino organizations are at those campuses and engage them as well. So those are things that the government needs to do a lot better at the state level. Look, state government, people tend to think of state government as some kind of social service type environment. Okay. I like to break the state government into occupational categories, right? Every agency has to have fiscal people. So they're going to need their CPAs and their accountants, et cetera. You have agencies, the biggest one, of course, is Human Services with over 13,000 employees, would tend to be uh, social services type jobs. But then you got to look at all those agencies that run laboratories, for example, and the ITs, right? Department of Innovation Technology, with the labs in the 5 state agency, forensic lab at state police, for example. So you got to look in terms of occupational fiscal, the sciences, right? The social services, public safety. Those are different categories that we look at. So any occupation that exists in private industry is probably going to exist in state government, right? I remember a person reached out to me many years ago from Champaign, who's finished up school from the Rockford area. He moved to Champaign, but he didn't like working as a chemist in private sector, and he was really depressed about it. I encouraged him to apply for the various lab jobs that were being posted to various state agencies, in particular public health. You know what? He landed in public health. He's now been promoted to a higher level in terms of quality control. So that's a success story that you want to hear, right? Is engaging people that are going to stay in government. I've moved into government 5, 6, 7 different times, different agencies. And so you can move around without losing seniority. Okay, and that's the beauty of working in state government. It's a big organization, so I think those are things that we need to continue to sell. Is that you have movement, You can move up and be more influential as you want, because you may start out in a front end process, right? But you're learning what's going on at the very intro level, and then you're moving on. You engage with the public, then you're getting into policy and programmatic, where you need to execute a program, and it's got to be done right. So those are things I think that are important.
Yes, I completely agree with you on that. And I think working in state government is so versatile, and there's so many opportunities that if you have a change of career or something else interests you, there's a job for you in government, and it's so easy to move from one job title to another. And so it is a huge advantage to be able to be part of the government workforce already, to be able to make those moves internally. And so, Chris, what is something that people may not expect about working in state government that makes the experience enjoyable, fulfilling, or very memorable for you?
I think that movement is part of it. Being able to live your whole career within the state is very possible. For me, it's shocking to meet gentlemen like Carlos and ladies like Diane that have lived long careers at the state of Illinois. The amount of people that I've met that have worked 40-year careers at the state of Illinois has been incredibly impressive. Um, there is a ton of time off, like Diane mentioned earlier. The pension is incredible after 10 years. Healthcare is great. There is an incredible work-life balance. But then on top of that, we're at the forefront, right? Like the state of Illinois is changing. The whole United States is changing. By the year 2040, we're going to be pretty close to the largest demographic out there, just based on population trends and growth. So it's something to consider. We need to be represented, and we need to make sure that we're here with our seat at the table and making sure that we are addressing the needs of our people, because the US is changing and Illinois is quite as well. So this is really the forefront of everything that's going on. The policy that's being made here affects everybody that lives in the state of Illinois and our neighbors as well, because there's plenty of folks that are talking about the potential of moving to Illinois due to some of the policies being enacted here every day. So shout out to those that are working to enact those policies, whether it's folks in government themselves, folks that are reading and interpreting law, so judges, and voting is really, really critical too, making sure that this is addressed every single time that we meet, we are aware of what's going on in our communities, because otherwise we lose out on quite a bit. And in the state of Illinois, being a state of Illinois employee, we get access to this information first. So it's really, really critical that folks are aware of it. And having more Hispanics and Latinos coming to join the state of Illinois is critical, because it just helps us be able to spread the word faster and make sure that it gets to our community more efficiently and more effectively, and also in a timely fashion, because otherwise we're missing out, right? If we don't know what's going on, then we are the news. Like that's the scary part. If you don't know what's on the menu, then you're on the menu, and it's something to really make sure that you're aware of it.
Yeah, no, Chris, definitely. And I think we've discussed, how a lot of these positions include policy making and interpreting and so on and so forth, also providing social services directly. But I also want to highlight the culture that, exists within the state of Illinois workforce. And so, Diane, how would you describe the culture among your coworkers and teams, given that you've been with the state for so long and you really enjoy your workplace?
Okay, well, I'm actually a junior. I'm junior. I'm 6 years in. I haven't been with the state that long. And I congratulate the people who have been with the state. I have colleagues who have been with the state for many years and who believe in the work, who have been there when we've changed administrations, right? When we've had the different administrations. And I asked my coworkers, I'm like, what's kept you here? It's the work. It's the purpose. I heard a quote a few days ago that I've been repeating and sharing with other people. When you have a purpose, the purpose will protect you. So the folks that I work with, they have a purpose and they say, no, I just love working here because I want to continue advocating. I want to continue helping my constituents, my Latinos. I consider us, all of us, the state of Illinois, the staff, the 57,000 people, we're the frontline workers. Regardless if you are in the executive level, or if you're the office up to the office associate, we're the frontline workers. We're the ones who are, we get the information first. We're there for our constituents, our customers. We're helping the folks that are have special needs. That's what keeps us going. And the people that I work with, honestly, I have we're a small agency. IDFPR is a small agency, and but we all work really well together. We all know who to go to, even with sister agencies. I'll give you an example. We license the nurses, but DPH licenses the CNAs. So I have a good rapport with folks at DPH that I could say, you know what, we don't license this profession, but I know I have a contact at DPH. So it's not just our agency that we have that I have good friendships, that I created a really good friendships with. I've created a lot of partners with the other agencies that I know I can go to because we're all working collectively towards the same goal to help that customer, to help that individual, regardless of it. We don't come and say, "Oh, I don't know the answer. I can't help you. Go find it somewhere else." No, I'm myself, I can speak for myself, very proactive. Proactive. What do you need? Let me find out. That's a good question. I'm going to find out for you. And that's what you do, even if it's not in my realm, even if not the subject matter expert. That's the nice thing about of working with state government, that we're all here working together. We all have the same goal. We want a good work-life balance and we want to be healthy and we support each other. I have a situation. What do you think? Let's bounce back ideas. How do you think I should approach this individual? And vice versa. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Diane. And I think that, community and along as well as like the community that you're serving and the community that you're working with really makes a difference in your everyday life. And so this question is for all of you. We're getting a little bit close to our end of our session, so we will have questions from our audience, and you all can also post them in the chat. So a question for you all is, public service often requires resilience. How do you stay motivated during difficult moments, setbacks, or periods when progress feels slow?
For me, it's really relying on colleagues that you trust to sit back and maintain perspective. Things are, yeah, things are slow sometimes for changes to occur. It's always been the case. Um, I think you sort of kind of wait it out and you see, because sometimes a change will occur if there's a change in leadership, okay, a change in management. So then you could see, one day we don't have a Latino managing this program, the next day we do. Now there's things moving, all right, that wasn't moving before. I just want to note, demographically speaking, of the composition of the state government in terms of minority representation. For example, generally speaking, African Americans usually represent a larger percentage of workers in state government, and that probably is in part over generations, because when African Americans were less likely to be discriminated applying for government jobs than they were in the private sector. Okay, so they were able to get into state government sooner than, because they had from previous generations, the process was less biased compared to the private sector. They thought that was a better shot at, and then that continued to grow because family members would refer their nephews and their nieces. Now, the same thing has to happen with Latinos coming in now, right? They have to do the job of encouraging other Latinos, whether it's el tío, la prima, sobrina, somebody to then move and get them to apply for the most part. So I think part of that is motivating to get everybody involved in the recruiting process that work for the state, that are Latinos to begin with, and involved. So I mean, come on. I've been known to, if I happen to be shopping at Menards or Home Depot and I see a Latino working at the register and there's nobody else around, I give them my card. Hey, think about working for the state. So it's like always thinking about that. But I think, yeah, when things aren't moving, you kind of have to wait. Sometimes you might have to rattle a cage, sometimes, to be honest with you. And it may take time, but also knowing who to ask, who's going to listen without, hurting anybody else's feeling. But I think having a good knowledge of how processes work in state government within the individual agencies is very important. I learned early on that I needed to know exactly what policy was saying, what was written in terms of the process that need to take place, because knowledge of how government runs is a very powerful weapon. So when somebody questions you, you say, look, that's not what it says in the procedure. Okay? That's not what this policy says. So are you asking me to change this? Or are you asking me to violate the policy? So those things are important, that you understand how your agency runs and how programs are run and how programs need to be administered. So that's my thing dealing with when things don't move along very well.
I'll go next. This is what I do when things don't move along the way I want them to. I go and hang out outside the building of 555 with one of my friends who's having a cigarette. I don't smoke. And I'm like, you know what? I need some support. I need to time myself out. I need to walk away from a situation, which isn't that often, right? But I just like to use a lot of humor in it because we do face a lot of challenges. We face challenges with policy, we face challenges with maybe other coworkers who aren't as passionate as I am, right? Not as passionate as other people. But you just learn how to move along. You learn how to adapt to the situation. A friend of mine a couple of years ago, I said, "You gonna what is it? Sink or swim?" And you know what she said to me? She's like, I'm gonna float, Diane. That's what I'm gonna do." And I looked at her, I said, "You know what? That's a really good reference. You're gonna float." So I am not gonna either I come from that mentality of adapt or swim. There's no in between. You got to do it. You got to hit it hard. So I've learned in state government, somebody once, the person who hired me, who recruited me, said, "Diane, you come from driving a Tesla, which is private sector, to driving a buggy in state government. So you got to be real patient. Things take a little longer. Don't get don't get your panties in a bunch. Let's try to like ease into it." And I've learned a lot of patience. I've learned to lean a lot out of people. I've learned to use my resources. Use your resource. Everybody's a resource. And just keep an open mind. Keep an open mind, and just there's things that you can't control. It's only what you can control, how you react to it. And if it's like something that you can say, you know what, let me bring up to leadership, I have a suggestion for a change, then use yourself as a resource, use an example, get your data, get all your homework in before you present it. Because I always like to use this model of I go to my manager, my supervisor, my director with the problem and the solution. Don't be the problem. Be part of the solution. Say, this is what I came up with. I have a solution for it. Now, can you give me your feedback? So that's where you want to, level it. So, mhm.
Thank you. And so to close our conversation, I want to provide a scenario for you all. And just, really quickly, what you would leave. So imagine a young person listening today who wants to make a difference in their community, but feels uncertain about how to go about doing that or their future. What is one piece of advice or encouragement you would want them to carry with them after this conversation?
Well, patience is something that has to be there for a person seeking employment with the state. It's being patient, um, knowing number one that it is a career move, that you could stay there for the rest of your life. I did pretty much, and you do you want to make a difference? Think about the people that that have engaged with state agencies and what experience they felt, from the experience of getting their driver's license renewed to the experience of getting a license, as in the case of Diane's agency, to help with their state income tax, assistance with other programs, and see what experience people have gone through and say, you know what, I can make that experience better for future Latinos in that position. So I think patience is important. Getting your foot in the door. My strategy typically, what I tell people is, look, if you're bilingual, look at the bilingual positions first, because you're competing with less people. Don't limit yourself to Chicago or Aurora. You have to think about that half the state jobs in the northern part of Illinois, and there's half the state jobs in the central and southern part of Illinois. And there have been Latinos who have moved to other outside of the Chicago area and have stayed down there, and find that life is a little easier for them. It's a little cheaper and less hectic, no traffic jams, things like that. So I think you have to keep an open mind about it. And I think the other thing that's important is to really work with the CMS career counselors, because there's over 2,600 job titles, and job titles can be deceiving as to what they really do. There's a generic payroll. We have what you have working titles, and you have payroll titles, the actual payroll title and working title. One job could be about managing grants, and that same title could be about investigating discrimination complaints internally at an agency. So descriptions are important to look at details, what they are, and what skill sets you bring with those skills. And remember, skill sets, as Chris pointed out, also includes any kind of volunteer work that you did. So those things are important. Patience, understanding the skills that you have as that relates to the job, being open-minded about where you're willing to work. I mean, Springfield is a 3 hour thing, right? 3 hour drive. You can take the Amtrak, and it's not as long. So people have done it where they go to Springfield, and if at some point they don't want to live in Springfield, they bid and transfer and apply for jobs in the northern part of Illinois. So I would say that's the key, is to look at those jobs outside of the Chicago area as well as internally within Chicago. And you have to keep applying over and over and over. People say, I applied for this title. And I said, yes, but there's the same title is posted. You cannot assume that just because you applied for the social service career trainee, that you've applied for all of them that were posted. You have to apply for all of them. I always say apply for every single thing that you're qualified for. And if you're not really interested in working in Springfield, for example, you should apply anyways, because at least you'll have an opportunity to experience what the interview process is. And at that point, you can decide if you don't want that job. Wait, be patient, apply, experiment with the different titles in different locations.
Thank you, Carlos, for that insightful. This is great for a lot of people who want to go into government jobs, but they don't really know where to start or what that looks like. Diane, Chris, would you all like to add to that?
I'd love to. The biggest lesson that I would tell anybody, young or old, is right the position that you're in or the job that you're looking for, you should either look to do one of two things, learn or earn, right? So you're either going to learn new experiences, learn new skills that are going to land you an even better job, or earn that money so that you can do what you want to do. So that's one of the first things that I would say. It's learn or earn. And then secondly, it's volunteer where and when you can. Volunteering, I think, is really fulfilling. And then on top of that, provides you a ton of experience that you just don't realize that you're missing out on. So whether it's, you know, checking in with your alderman's office, your state rep's office, your state senator's office, there are plenty of opportunities that are just there right around the corner. A lot of them also host job fairs. They also host job skills fairs as well, so that you can skill up. There are a ton of community partners that we work with as well that are here to do that workforce training. So looking at those things, can you learn and how can you continue to earn? Definitely worth considering when thinking of the state of Illinois, as well as local government, um, city government, county government. Always keep that in mind. There's plenty of opportunities, and this is not the only way in.
Thank you, Chris. Diane?
I have always be networking. Always be networking. Always. Anybody that you meet, anybody you come across, Don't be shy. Go up to them and say, "Hey, my name is so and so. What do you do?" Because you never know what that opportunity. That's how I landed my position with state government.
Looks like Diane froze there.
Oh,
Are we
I'm
still
here.
there?
I'm still here. Did I freeze?
I think you're okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm good. So always be networking. Don't be shy. You have the no. You already have a no. You're going for your yes. So knock on every door. Knock on every door. Always be networking. Like Chris said, go volunteer. Go volunteer. Go around the corner. Go to your church. Go wherever, whatever sector you pray to. It's a soft skill. You never know who you're going to run into. Someone like Carlos, you never know. You're working at Menards, you're a cashier, and he's like, "Hey, I think you'll be good at this position." So always be networking. Don't be shy. Don't keep looking down. Keep looking up. Always look up. And don't get discouraged by how many no's you get or how many your application is still in process. So we're working on that, right, Chris? We're working on your application is still in process. Don't get discouraged. Go to the next position and apply for that one and apply. Eventually, you're going to get something. So that's what I always been networking.
You're
Thank-
also always a work in progress as well. So don't ever forget that we're all works in progress. None of us are the finished article.
Very true. Very true. So, at this time, I want to thank our panelists for their insight, tips, and sharing their stories of becoming public servants. At this time, we will have time for a few questions and would like to open the floor for any questions that we may have. Please raise your hand and I will go in order. I don't see any hands. Let me
I just
see.
want to add, while we're waiting for people to ask questions, is I think it's important that now we use our LinkedIn accounts. I use mine. The association has one, but I look at LinkedIn to promote the state jobs for the most part. But what's also interesting about LinkedIn is that if you apply, let's say, for a job at a state agency of a particular title, and you find that on LinkedIn, that person who actually works in that title and try to connect them. Because I try to connect people, especially when they go right before an interview, I will connect someone with a state worker who actually does that job to talk to them about that job and mentor them. So those things are important is that, you see a job at an agency, you look at that agency, and most agencies, there's people following it that work there. You can see who's working there. So that's kind of important that, um, yeah, that's how I did find a lot of people that I send over to state jobs is on LinkedIn, that we connect with. But I think it's important that the Latinos mentor other people in getting into state government. And if you got an interview coming up and you don't know who to connect with, reach out to me or Diane or Chris, and we'll connect you with somebody who actually does that job. Um, and there goes Cynthia telling about a job at ISD. There you go. So, um, then I see people already connected me on LinkedIn, Jesus. So appreciate that. But I think it's important that we build our network within the Latino community of professionals, and connecting with them. It's interesting that there are certain job titles in state government, that after so many years, you wind up getting a very high paying job in the private sector. That's just because you look, especially when it comes to regulatory type jobs, you become a very valuable person. We had a Latino lawyer leave us in Springfield to work for Caterpillar because he did contracts that do it, IT contracts, and he learned a lot from that. Not to mention he worked 10 years, and after that, they paid off his student loans. Okay, and if you're working like in the financial institutions, um, uh, it's a financial institution trainee where they become bank examiners, example, or financial examiners. They wind up working for banks at a high level, or credit unions wind up being vice president, stuff like that. So those, don't think about it that, you know, I I was comfortable with the money I was paid. I mean, I started out with the state government getting paid about $5 an hour back in the day, 1980. So, but life is good in terms of the having a stable income, stable insurance, and stable work hours.
Thank you, Carlos. So I don't see any questions on the chat and I don't see any hands, but I do want, before we jump off, I do want to mention if actually if one of you all can highlight, maybe Chris, talk about maybe is there tuition reimbursement? What are some of the opportunities for state employees to continue their career growth?
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's tuition reimbursement. There's also professional development budgets that are around and available to us. There's also a lot of travel that is included in our roles to go and visit, whether it's conferences or professional conferences, trainings. CMS also now has a professional development program within for leadership for mid-management or higher up that they are working on goal, which I know Diane is a part of if you want to talk about goal and being a goalie. Um, the state is working on those things as well and making sure that it is a requirement of the state, and we provide it to all state employees to make sure that they can take advantage. And then if you're in the union position, there's also upward mobility, which is a training program that you can participate in. There's also CMS University, so you can actually do skills and upskilling so you can learn and grow within your role within the state of Illinois. So there's tons of opportunities. There's also tuition reimbursement, like you were saying, so you can continue school and doing that. We also partner with veterans with their GI Bill. I've known quite a few veterans that work for the state of Illinois. Didn't cost them a thing to go back to school at all because it was covered between their GI Bill and the state reimbursement process. So whether it was a master's degree, a bachelor's, or anything else that they were looking for, the state's here and has the budget to do it. We have a balanced budget, which is great. The state is never going out of business as far as anything going on here, and that's not something that we can say with federal shutdowns and everything else. So always keep that in mind as well.
Thank you, Chris. We are pretty much at time. Does anyone have any last
I
comments they would like to provide?
I just want to share a goal. Sign up for goal. I'm a goalie 2026. The reason we did the 12:30 was because I had a 10 to 12 goal class. Goal is something that I encourage everybody to look into, sign up for it, read through it. It's the best thing that's happened, state of Illinois has offered. And don't ever think that you cannot apply for this nor have the qualifications because I signed up for it and I got in and I love it. So I encourage everybody who is with the state currently, and if you want to do that, you want to be, part of the come and play with us at Goalies. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful program, and the people who spearheaded are wonderful, bringing great motivational speakers, a lot of great tools. So yeah, that's the shout out for my goalies and past goalies.
And I just want to, there's actually there's one question. Is there an opportunity for tuition assistance for exempt employees?
I replied already. Yes, there is, and that they should check with their agency HR. Policies are a little bit different, but it depends on your grades, I believe. So I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head, what the percentage is that it's covered.
It depends on the budget at the time. They have set aside money in each agency for training purposes. And the question is, did they max out already on that expenditure? So yes, and it has to be related to their job, so for the most part. So it's something like they're not gonna pay you to go into training for exempt employees if you're studying to be in an occupation that's not related to your job. So it has to be related to the job. So if you're working as an accountant, for example, in your agency, in an exempt position, but you want to get your CPA, certified public, there's a possibility that they would do that because it's a continuation of what you're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you. So thank you so much to our panelists for your honesty, your stories, and your leadership. Your experiences remind us that public service is not just a career path, but a commitment to community, equity, and impact. To everyone here today, especially students and young professionals, your path does not need to be linear, and you do not need to have everything figured out to begin. What matters is showing up, remaining open to opportunity, and believing that you belong in these spaces. Thank you all for joining today's Cafecito conversation. We appreciate your time, your energy, and your commitment to building stronger communities through public service. And so, with that, I would like to pass it on to Liz Villarreal.
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you all for the panelists. This was truly a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot, and it was really engaging, and made me want to get more involved and understand how policy works. So thank you, Carlos. Please follow us on social media to learn more about our future events. We do have one scheduled for June, finalizing the date since it is June LGBT Pride Month. And then we're also scheduling an upcoming cafecito with Dr. Joseph Gonzalez, who is a aerospace engineer at U of I, who was part of the Artemis. So if you have students that are interested in those careers, look out for the date. So excited. Thank you all and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.